Welcome to new churros, we about to drop. I like to take things easy, nice and slow. Nothing better, get some weather, so let's start the churros. Let's go. Eat that sticky grub.
Hello and welcome to the Churros y Tácticas Podcast. We have a new shortened intro, I guess. It's the same jingle, same beat, but we just kind of get into it sooner because, I think we've all been listening to the intro for a while now, and we thought we could, we'll just cut through it. Have the epic beats. Diego will shorten down the rap part, and we'll just jump right into it. We have a freestyle coming up later, halfway through the show, and we have no idea what we're talking about today. Slow news day. We're gonna improvise. This is completely raw, unscripted as always, but particularly today because we have no idea what to talk about. So we'll see what we come up with. We're gonna cook something. It's like the churros chef got into the kitchen today, saw that there were no ingredients to work with, so he got no flour, no water, no sugar. So he's got to figure out how to make a churro, and that's what we're doing. We just got in the kitchen, no ingredients, and so we're gonna have to serve our customers somehow. So joining me, Kiyan Sobhani, is Diego Lorijn. Diego, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing all right, man. I'm a little bit frustrated because my new webcam, I shouldn't say my new webcam is giving up, but the USB adapter is not cooperating. So here we are with the same audio, but the video is, as you can see, still not working. I had to choose one or the other, whether I was going to give you video or audio. Obviously, the priority goes to the audio. So I have my USB mic plugged in with the official Apple adapter, and the knockoff Amazon one for $10 is not cooperating. So I'm trying to stream old school style from my phone, at least record the video from my phone. The mic is working, Kiyan. The lights are up. They're working. What do you think of this look and feel?
Well, it started off really promising. Listeners don't know this, but you had a whole beautiful setup with a new camera, all these things, really good lighting in the background and everything. And it just wasn't working. So Diego had to go back to the old video, which is just leggy. I have something else to twist the knife into your soul, because I don't think you know this, but I think your mic may not be connected. You may be talking to the built-in right now.
No, I don't think so.
No? All right, you sound a little bit different. I mean, it's not terrible, but you just sound slightly not as crisp as usual. But
God damn it. I'm checking on it right now.
Great start to the churros. We refuse to edit, we refuse to be professional, and we just kind of go into it, and it gets even rawer on the Patreon edition once a week. By the way, the ratings are in for our episode on Thursday, patreon.com/Churros y Tácticas. Greatest episode ever. I mean, it just was lights out. People were raving about it. So that is in the books. We got it to really transparent stuff that we're not allowed to talk about publicly. And both you and I disclose some things that we normally wouldn't say, just because we're not kind of supposed to do that. So we got into that stuff, and that's the benefit of being a patron over on patreon.com/Churros y Tácticas. I think the top of the list, Diego, is pretty devastating news coming out of Barcelona, though, with Ronald Araujo.
Can say that again. Araujo out for the Clasico. Potentially also the World Cup. The big doubt right now is, will he undergo surgery or not? It was in a friendly with Iran, if I'm not mistaken. It was Uruguay-Iran, where he got picked up an injury that is similar to Umtiti's injury. And at the moment, the word around the campfire is that the club doctors are basically trying to use Umtiti as an example to persuade Ronald Araujo to indeed undergo surgery. The reason being is that Umtiti in his day didn't, and quite clearly, evidently never recovered from the injury that became a nagging, repeated injury, and it has never been the same since. They're talking right now a period that he'll be out for a period of 3 months, up to 3 months. That's sort of the worst case. And there is a case where they could shorten that time, and that is, of course, if Araujo decides not to undergo surgery. With the World Cup looming, with Uruguay having the team that they have, with the pride, obviously, any player's dream is to play for the national side and perform in a World Cup. They have the chance to do that, and of course have a very good team to do so. Araujo being a fundamental part in that defensive system as well. So it's going to be a difficult one. Right now, nobody knows exactly, what is going through Araujo's head, except for him and Barca's medical staff. We'll have to wait and see what his final decision will be. I think all culés will be hoping, of course, for the latter, meaning him undergoing surgery and taking his time to, come rehabilitate and come back fully fit, as opposed to the short-term solution where, he could potentially make it for the World Cup. But then, what is going to happen? What will happen? What Araujo will we get with such a short-term, objective in on his mind? So we'll see. We will see. I think right now the club is hopeful that he will undergo surgery. If I have to believe what is being said, the medical staff and Araujo have had a meeting this Monday morning. Oh my God, I'm very sorry. The club has confirmed that he will be undergoing surgery in Finland.
Yeah, I didn't see the club confirmation, but I had seen the report in Mundo Deportivo that had stated he would go under the knife in Finland. But I wasn't sure if it was confirmed in the club. But
my apologies.
Yes.
I
mean, you have nothing to apologize for. You work for Barcelona. So if you didn't know, that means you just, either you just don't follow your own club, or you just you just missed it, or it's pretty recent. So look, this sucks. I mean, it also, what's the timeline for Kounde to return?
Yeah, that's similar, around a month, 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah. So not at all similar, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it looks like you'll be going into Clasico without Kounde and Araujo, which is troubling. Now, I think it's one of those things where, if you had to make a short list of people who have given Vinicius trouble defensively,
right,
Araujo's in the short list. And now, who's the right back that day? I mean, we're getting really ahead of ourselves, but this is the nature of Churros y Tácticas Podcast, Real, Barca, rest of La Liga, etc. in that order. Or really Barca, Real, because we talk about Barca more than we talk about Real Madrid, I'd say. But looking ahead to that, I mean, it's between Bellerin, Sergio Roberto, maybe Christensen puts there. We all know what happened, Christensen versus Vinicius at Stamford Bridge. So that's a tough blow for you guys. And again, not to overemphasize it, again, this is just mostly how much respect I have for Araujo personally. I think he's an awesome defender. But, I think Clasico will be, in some ways, decided by some of those fine margins of, key matchups of who's going to stop Vinicius. And is that the difference between 3 points, 1 point? A 6-point swing is possible in a game like this where, 3 points for one, the other team goes behind. Those could be the details in a tight league race. I may be overthinking or overanalyzing, but it's obviously a huge blow. But I think the correct decision is whatever gives you the best chance of returning stronger long term. And you detach yourself from whatever happens in the Clasico. And obviously, for him, more gutting than losing the Clasico is definitely the World Cup, representing your country in such a special occasion. That's even more gutting for him, I'm sure. But that it's probably the right decision because it wasn't an easy decision to miss the World Cup. And if he and the doctors feel like he'll come back stronger this way, then obviously that's the best outcome, you know. So sucks for Uruguay, sucks for him, sucks for everyone. But certainly, I think long term, you want Araujo to be healthy.
Of course,
following Umtiti's footsteps.
Right, and it's I'm sure it was a tough choice as well. There was the fear lingering amongst Ocules, like I mentioned just previously, that he would follow the path of an Umtiti, and especially with the World Cup looming, the passion that in particular, you know, South Americans have to compete in this tournament for their country. Yeah, the fear was real. This comunicado, this official statement, blew by me, but I'm happy to have stumbled upon it now, and indeed, yeah, it is confirmed that he will undergo surgery in Finland, and he'll be out at least a minimum of 3 months. So, you know, the remainder of the year, the right choice, without a shadow of a doubt, despite it being hurtful for him. And with regards to the upcoming Clasico, you know, Jules Kounde, as I mentioned, 3-4 weeks out, it'll be tight. There's a chance that he'll make it, of course, for the Clasico. We need him desperately, whether it is in a right back or now central defensive position. Fingers crossed. Similar to, you know, Memphis and Frenkie, I don't know the degree of their injuries, but this international break has been a blow, because right now, without official confirmation, unless I have not been made aware of it, is that both midfielder and the striker can be out for several weeks, and are even doubtful for the upcoming game in once the Champions League restarts again, so against Inter. So we'll have to wait and see for that. Yeah,
it's a pretty tough blow, and look, it's one of those things that you just hate about international football. It's you know, it could have happened to any team, could happen to anyone, and it's just, you know, it's kind of Russian roulette when you send your players on international duty.
It's crazy that, huh?
It's basically just, you know, some teams will get lucky, some players will get lucky, other players will just come back wounded, and it sucks. I have an announcement to make for you.
Yeah.
I finally watched El Caso Figo.
Yeah. I did see something about you. I think I saw. Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
We spent 2 hours talking about it on the podcast yesterday. But I wanted to discuss a new element with you that I don't think listeners have heard me discuss that much. Is that Matt asked me the question yesterday. Do you think Barca fans' perception of Figo changed after watching the documentary? Do you think they're more forgiving after seeing how difficult it was for him to move and that he didn't really want to go?
That's a good question. So you guys painted Figo as the victim in all this, then?
I don't know if victim is the right word. My conclusion from the documentary was that what it took for him to leave was ultimately basically him not feeling valued at Barca, 2 elections happening at the same time. The Barca elections were disadvantageous for the re-signing of Figo. An insane clause that Vega signed, and basically just everything that had to work to get him there. And even still, it didn't seem like he wanted to go, and his wife certainly didn't want to go.
Yeah, that moment.
What I came away from this was that I think initially he definitely didn't want to go. And it wasn't because the whole thing that I think that Barca fans portrayed him as was a liar and a mercenary, etc. Because he had said so many times that I'm not going to Real Madrid.
Right.
What I'm saying is that after watching this documentary, I think there's at least an understanding in that, in my opinion, when he said I'm never going to Real Madrid and I'm playing with Barcelona and I'm re-signing and I'm posing with the shirt like the day before, I think that he genuinely was not lying about that. I think that's what he actually felt.
But all the while knowing that him or his representatives, his agents, his managers signed a contract where it stipulated if he didn't complete or honor that contract, he would have to cough up, what was it, 30 million or something? It was along those lines.
But I mean, it seemed it was Vega who would have been in trouble more than Figo, I think.
Okay, but where's Vega going to get that kind of money from? And plus, he would have probably argued that he acted in representation and had the authority of Figo, the player, to sign up on his behalf. So let me get to your question. Mm-hmm. The perception of culés. No, I don't think that's changed. Knowing how, from firsthand, right? I mean, I wrote an article back in the day for Barca Blaugranes where I tried to shed a empathetic light.
Yeah.
Basically arguing and stating that Figo had his reasons to demand a better contract, an improved contract, and eventually probably had good reasons to leave as well. And that was, purely based on facts. The facts were that at that time, Figo had already played 5 very successful seasons at the club, had been fully integrated in Catalunya and the club, the culture. He was a people's champion, beloved by all, even the club poster boy and Pep Guardiola himself, as you saw in the documentary, no doubt, they were very close, shared rooms. Pep was visibly very affected by it, even speaking about it now, this topic. And so I thought that was quite beautiful because it just it went to show just how tightly knitted that relationship was and how authentic it was. So after 5 seasons, he wanted an improved contract and be treated the same way that Rivaldo was treated at the time. And then nobody spoke about Rivaldo at that in this documentary, which was a little bit surprising to me because I think the parallels there can certainly be made with a player that had just been brought in. Rivaldo had been playing for Barca for 2 seasons, if I'm not mistaken, not 3, but had already, demanded an improved contract, had gotten basically his wishes granted, became, one of the best paid players at the time. And certainly when it came to who is the best player at that time, it was between Rivaldo and Figo, at least from the eyes of any culé at that time. Our star players were Rivaldo and Figo. And there was no doubt that Figo was in the conversation of being of the best player. In fact, he won the Balón de Oro shortly after that, right? And when he just made his move to Real Madrid. And of course, that Balón de Oro was granted for the success he had with Barca, that's his time at Barca, and the Euro Cup as well. So I argued in that paper, I said, look, and this is a summary, but I certainly gave Figo his props, and let's say I gave him weight behind his argument or his decision eventually, because I said, look, we had a player like Rivaldo who was not as hadn't been here as long, was not as much integrated, in fact had many public spats and behind closed doors between Louis van Gaal. In that sense, Figo his behavior had been exemplary up until that point. So, I could understand with all the egos of that football players have, why Figo maybe was feeling a little bit shunned. He was like, look, why are you not even entertaining this thought? And as we saw in the documentary as well, Gaspart was very dismissive of even entertaining the conversation. Now, you could say yes, but Gaspart wasn't in power yet, and there's certainly a valid point to make. I think that Figo acted prematurely. He acted without much patience. He didn't really practice the art of patience very much. I think he was very kind of clumsy in his way of dealing with that situation, such a sensitive situation, in particular when you're, entertaining and flirting with our biggest rival. So that was very immature, very clumsy, nothing new. We know that Vega, and this might have been new news for other people, but in Barca we were made, or in Barcelona we were made very aware of Figo's situation prior coming to Football Club Barcelona, with his manager's shady dealings with Juventus and Parma, I believe it was, where he signed a contract with both parties, and eventually that was, Serie A, the Italian Federation said, you can't do this. The easy decision is basically not allowing you to play in Serie A, and that eventually allowed him to come to Barca. So, there were kind of red flags in the past. There were warning signs that his manager was not to be trusted. And I think, Gaspart didn't take the bait, maybe ignored the red flags, acted too slowly. Figo maybe acted too quick and too immaturely. And he, all of a sudden found himself in a situation at a point of no return. Reluctantly, I think it has to be said that he genuinely didn't want to leave, whether it was based on his wife, that didn't want to leave, or him not wanting to leave what he had at Barca, what he had built there, his legacy. I defended him in that paper, or I want to say I tried to shed a light from his perspective in that paper, but I still find it indefensible, inexcusable, his very clumsy manner in dealing with this, and eventually, it's unforgivable as well. So if your question is, do we forgive him? The answer is no. I still think it was. I don't want to say the words, but a certain animal comes to mind, and it's very because of my lack of vocabulary, I can't come up with a more eloquent word from ratty behavior, traitor-like behavior, and very hurtful for Culés at the time, no doubt.
I don't think forgive is the right word, but I was wondering about, is there any little bit more empathy, even if it's like a minuscule margin, like a 1% more empathy than before the documentary came out? Because my read on, and I remember saying this years ago, that Figo made the decision himself. Ultimately, it's his call. Like, we can't dissolve him of blame for, like, you can't just say, like, it wasn't him, it was an agent. But I will say, and I've said this before, is that I think he was ill-advised. And I think he wasn't necessarily smart enough to recognize some of these things that Vega was doing. But at the same time, I mean, the reason you hire an agent, among many other reasons, but is because you're a footballer. You're focused on being a footballer. You're not necessarily supposed to be smart enough to understand some of the intricacies and legal implications of some things. That's why you have an agent and lawyers to deal with the legal side of things and to work on that stuff. And I think my takeaway from the doc was that Figo basically gave Vega the executive decision to do what he thinks is, like, if you need to sign something, sign something. I think it was more like Figo gave him executive decision, and Vega didn't run this by Figo in the end. Was like, hey, can I sign this clause for where, like, I'll owe Florentino 30 million if you don't go to Real Madrid. And that side of it is like, I'd be sympathetic towards Figo a little bit. I mentioned your article on the Managing Madrid podcast yesterday.
Hey.
And I basically, I said, from what I remember, because I tried to find the article, I couldn't find it.
They don't have it up anymore.
Well, so Barca Blaugranes is, quite frankly, they basically shunned you for speaking your truth. And you were the most.
That was my last article.
You're the most legitimate guy on the website. You literally worked for the club. You were working for La Liga TV at the time. And you actually said, and basically what happened was, none of the Barca fans liked the fact that you defended Figo and went at the club a little bit at that time. And then the people at Barca Blaugranes just deleted the article and banned you, which is basically, it might as well be, not to get myself into trouble, but it might as well be a country run by a dictator.
That's what it is.
Without mentioning which country. So that happened. So anyways, I couldn't find it. So I went off memory and said, because when Matt asked me this question, I said, well, Diego wrote this article that didn't go down very well, where he basically said the club could have done more. Is that the correct takeaway from the article, that you think the club could have done more at that time to retain him?
Yes.
Because when Gaspart comes out and says, there's that quote in the documentary where he says, he publicly, it's not actually, it's a archival footage where he's on TV and he's saying, if Figo has signed for Real Madrid, there's nothing that can be done. What I thought about when he said that was like, no, that's true, but this was not about what happens this summer. This goes back, and that this was preventable earlier. Had you valued him,
right?
Had you sat down with the contract. It's not like this is not some random player. At the time, we have to remember he was probably the best player in the world.
Yeah.
So if anyone deserves, like, hey, can you sit down with me? It's him.
Correct. Now, the only thing that and what you just stated was basically my argument in that paper. I'm happy to pass it on to you. I still have it on my hard disk.
Nice.
But what the documentary, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did the documentary highlight or state that Figo had actually managed to improve his contract just a year prior to that summer? Because that was information, I want to say that that was information that was unbeknown to me beforehand, and I want to say that the documentary highlighted that fact, but I'm not 100% sure. So
I don't remember that part of it.
Okay.
So maybe probably not.
Okay. So again, yes, the club, in my opinion, should have sat down, spoken to Luis Figo, especially after giving Rivaldo caving into his demands and improving his contract, because no doubt about it, whether it was whether he was number one or number two, Figo was in that conversation of being not just the best player for the team, but of the entire world, as was proven a little while later when he won the Balón de Oro, deservedly so. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because it was at a time as well where, of course, just a few years prior, we had to prematurely say goodbye to Ronaldo, the original. Now there, I want to be upfront and defend Luis Núñez and Gaspart and the Barca board, because the deal was basically agreed on and a new contract was put into place just 1 year after Ronaldo had been with the club. Ronaldo was on the plane, celebrating the renewal of this contract and celebrating the fact that he was going to stay with Barca. He traveled to Brazil. By the time he touched down in Brazil, he got a call from his manager saying, "Hey, I just spoke to these guys from Inter. They are willing to pay, you much more money. Let's put the squeeze on Barca a little bit more and see if we can get more out of this situation." And Núñez threw up his hands and said, "Listen, you're not honoring the contract we have just agreed upon. What the fuck is going on here? If it's going to be like this, we're going to let you go." Kiyan, you and I, we've talked about many times how a player cannot be bigger than a club. We commend Florentino Perez for sticking to that principle. And, I have to commend Luis Núñez for sticking to that exact same principle. We've seen what happens when presidents do cave in to players' demands. We saw firsthand experience at that, during the era of Bartomeu, where he was handing out massive contracts left and right, like it was nothing. And at some point in time, you have to stand your ground as a club, even if it is, standing your ground against one of the greatest of all times, whether it's at the time of all time, whether it's a Ronaldo, whether it's a Messi, or whether it's a Figo, at some point you have to say, guy, this is your contract. In both these cases, we have just renewed your contract. And sorry, I say both these cases. Again, I'm not 100% sure of Figo, but in Ronaldo's case, that's it. Enough is enough. So,
So, I definitely agree that no player should be bigger than club. I do think the Ronaldo situation can be regarded as an exception to the rule. Not to say that he was bigger, but Ronaldo, when he leaves in 1997, is, on trajectory to be the greatest player of all time. Mm-hmm. He had one of the most ridiculous seasons in football history.
Yeah.
If I'm the president at that time, and Ronaldo Nazario, who is literally Michael Jordan at that point, he's the poster boy of Nike, he's extremely marketable, he's an unbelievable talent. If he came to me and honestly said the honest truth, Inter are paying more, I know we signed a contract, but now they couldn't have actually signed the contract, did they? Because if he did, they wouldn't even have been allowed to go to Inter. It must have been more of a verbal agreement, right?
I don't know. I don't know if Inter paid the buyout clause. I don't remember right now.
I have to look at that again. But if that was honestly, and I could afford it, and he said, I'm getting paid more. I'm sorry, but this is the situation. I have to go unless you can match it. I'd look at Ronaldo up and down, and I'd be like, all right, you're worth it. And I would detach my pride in the fact that this was happening away from that. Now, in hindsight, I suppose I wouldn't say it worked out, but it kind of did in the sense that it probably was easier for you guys to swallow that because of Ronaldo's knee injuries, unfortunately. And plus, Figo and Rivaldo and all these guys were so good that you guys had a great team. But obviously, by the time Figo leaves, the club is just in a terrible state at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know. I suppose this is more of an overarching point, but Nunez, and I suppose Gaspart after him, wouldn't you say they had a knack for undervaluing the players they had?
Well, no. I mean, it depends. I guess what cases would support that argument. You could say that with Rivaldo, he was given everything, that he wished for. In a case of a Figo, you could make that argument. Undervalued, yes. But, I don't know. Kluivert was happy, getting paid nice money. I don't know. I guess you would have to take it on a case-to-case basis.
I suppose where I'm getting at this, there's the whole... And I this is kind of fresh in my mind because I'm writing about this in my book right now. Because I'm at the stage where I'm talking about Bernd Schuster, and obviously Bernd Schuster is one of the only two players in history to have played for Barca, Atletico, and Real Madrid.
Right.
And the weird thing about him is that he doesn't really have legendary status at any of those three.
Yeah.
But he was also amazing at all.
He was a great player. Yes.
He was great at Barca. And then he goes to Real Madrid. He wins back-to-back league titles there. And then and every situation he leaves, he leaves Barca essentially because of a falling out with Nunez. And then he leaves Real Madrid because at the time La Liga had implemented this thing about foreign player limits. And I think they should have kept him, but they ultimately decided he was one of the foreign players that could be expendable. He goes to Atletico and he does amazing with Atletico. But when he leaves Barca, there's that whole thing. And I don't know if this precedes your time. I don't know if you're old enough for this part, but certainly this was happening around the year I was born, I think in the late 80s, right before Schuster goes to Real Madrid. There's that whole fallout between Nunez and basically half the team where there's that situation where so many players in the squad were signed 2 contracts. One was public, one was private. The public contract basically was one thing, but it basically didn't show the entire truth, which allowed Barca and the players, by extension, I think, to pay less tax that was legally allowed.
Okay.
And when this gets leaked that this was happening, Nunez says the players have to pay the penalty about all this. And then the players come out publicly and say, hey, man, you made us sign this contract. And ultimately what happened was Nunez convinces the fans that it's the players who basically need to get their shit together. They're against the club. Coming out like this, it's against club's values. And then they all come out, and there's a Clasico in... I want to get the year right. Again, I think it was the year I was born. I think it was 1987 or 86, one of those 2 years.
Okay.
The Barca players come out to Camp Nou during Clasico and they get booed. And then the Real Madrid players come out and they get cheered.
Oh.
And so this was a very strange time. And when I was getting all the sides of the story for this part of my book, Nunez gave me a lot of Bartomeu vibes in publicly shaming. I feel like if Twitter was around, then Nunez would get the fake Twitter accounts to go against the players too. So I just want to get your perspective on that. That's
super fascinating. So this must have been right around the time where Gary Lineker was there, and I knew of some turmoil that was happening with Lobo Carrasco, if I'm not mistaken, was still there. Salinas. I didn't know the degree to which this situation was kind of like, let's say, all of the inputs of this situation and how it kind of boiled over and escalated when the Clasico pulled up and fans were actually booing their own players and applauding Real Madrid. That's fascinating, man. That's news to me. At that time, no, I was not checking into Barca news or watching regular Barca games. That didn't start really until sort of the early 90s. And but that's fascinating. The parallels between Nunez and Bartomeu, I would stay away from those.
That's fair. Bartomeu is a special breed for sure.
I mean, if we're talking Gaspart and Bartomeu, then that's more an accurate, I think, comparison. Gaspart himself in the documentary openly says that he was one of the worst presidents of Barca ever in history.
Were you surprised he was admitting of that?
No. It's not the first time I've heard him admit to this. He's a very likable guy, despite the fact that he looks like Mr. Burns, and of course his
wow, I never realized.
Oh yeah, his nickname is Mr. Burns.
Okay.
And he's all heart. He's very emotional. He's a diehard culé, and I don't know if you remember from the documentary, but the scenes, like I remember just so vividly those scenes where after the deal was done and when the Clasico rolled around, the lunch, the awkward lunches that the presidents have, where Florentino has just got this permanent, kind of smug smirk on his face, and the journalists are loving it. They're eating it up, and they're like, "Come on, pose for the picture," and all that. And Gaspart is getting all annoyed and angry.
I thought that was hilarious. I thought Florentino's entire performance in this documentary was incredible.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great documentary. It omits a few things, but I'm just seeing now. Goddammit, I'm on your YouTube page. You got Dan Trihorn.
Yeah.
On the pod. Fuck, that's awesome, man. That's I'm gonna listen to that.
Fun conversation.
That's so cool. Congratulations, dude. I would love to. I'm going to listen to this. I would love to speak to him. I would love to know how they got this documentary together and manage to speak with all the protagonists. And Florentino says, the protagonist. So the truth and nothing but the truth came from his mouth, supposedly. It was great. It's a great documentary. What's fun is to relive all of that again. And, I spent my summers in Spain. Always, it was as soon as summer holiday hits, drive the car Holland to Spain, and that summer was so I just remember it so vividly. It was really the first big kind of media explosion. I mean, had social media been around in those days, I don't know I can't even imagine how it would have all gone down.
It would have been disgusting. I think it would have been insufferable to be a part of social media if that was around. Yeah,
absolutely. But you have to understand as well that, I think it's easy to, I don't know if you guys got into this, but if it's easy to point a bad light at Barca fans and say, oh, look at how they treated Luis Figo, and look at that barbaric behavior. And okay, they didn't show the pig's head because that was in the second Clasico on his return. I guess they didn't revisit the second Clasico, so that's probably why the pig's head wasn't put in there. But
about that.
Oh, okay.
First of all, I always get mixed up which one's which, because there's the first return and there's the second one. I always get mixed up the events of the two. It's all like one to me.
Sure.
But he said the reason they omitted the pig's head was because they wanted to tell the story as it was happening and not in retrospect. And apparently, from what he said, and I don't remember this because I remember that game wasn't on TV in Canada Live. We listened to it on Cadena Ser. So we didn't, but he said that in real time, the pig's head was not noticed because it's literally the size of like your hand.
It's a cochinillo. It's a baby pig. Yeah.
Yeah, which is like devastating. Poor baby pig, man. Everybody should go vegan. But they throw it out and it just looks like a bottle or anything else. And I think it's later the papers or something picked up that it was a pig's head and they published the picture. So they wanted it more like how people experience it in real time rather than. That was his explanation. But anyway, sorry, I cut you off.
Okay. No, just to say, yeah, I mean, and also that was the second Clasico, which they didn't even talk about that. So my take was always like, I guess they didn't talk about it because, they didn't get to the second Clasico. It was more about the transfer and his first return. But just to highlight the point that Figo was so beloved, man. And, I've said this on the pod several times, but I'm not kidding you when I say that at the time I would visit my hairdresser with a picture of Figo, shout out to Eleganti, and say, I want my hair done like Luis Figo. That was
me too.
All right. Well,
it was just a wall of gel. It's just a brick wall of gel.
A lot of gel. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Try to get the sideburns sideburns a little longer, and I never quite got it. Mind you, at first it was Giovanni, and then it was Figo when it was clear that Giovanni was not even half the player that Figo was. So, but again, like Figo just, he endeared himself to the local fans so much. And it was so rare for a foreigner as well to be so in sync, to be so intrinsically involved with the community where, he was shouting Madrid cabrón, salud al campeón. And there's literally maybe like a handful of foreign players that I can name right now, from maybe Kubala, obviously Stoichkov, Figo, maybe Samuel Eto'o, but then, I mean, recently, certainly Kubala, Stoichkov, and Figo are the three that would stand out for me as being like foreign players that became just part of the local culture. Actually, Luis Enrique. I'll give you Lucho as well.
Come on, he's not foreign.
Well, he's not Catalan. He's not, so he's considered a foreigner here. Trust me.
Well, I can't excuse Barca fans regardless of. Because once they started to bring his wife and kid into the whole thing, that was too far.
What, in stadiums?
Yeah, just like calling his wife terrible names and.
Yeah, but listen, you can talk about football fans in general. That's not the first nor last time where we've heard disgusting, appalling. That's not the excuse, but that's not like a first or last, it's not a one-off.
First, last, in between, whatever, I always think that's crossing the line.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say, if it happens to me, come after me. Like, there's even, like, people telling him to go die or whatever. You gotta say that about me, say it about me. But the moment you bring, like, my wife or kid into it, like, that's not cool.
I agree. And again, but you can't single out, in this case, it's Barca fans, but that's something that we've heard far too many times in stadiums all around Spain. I mean, the whole, like... Okay. The muérete. No, of course not. But it just goes to show that the pain was very real, because the admiration and the love and the relationship was so real and felt so real, and it was something that was, we were very proud of. And of course, then when in the newspapers, the Mundo Deportivo's Luis Figo started to appear and categorically deny the possibility of him going to Real Madrid, and then even to say like, this is my final decision. And every day the newspaper was just flying off the shelves. Like I couldn't get my mom or dad, quicker to like drive me to the local kiosk to pick me up the newspaper of the next day to see what the next, what the next episode of this saga, this soap series that was taking place during that summer, what it was going to, unveil then. Like it was so hard for us to imagine, of course, Figo leaving, let alone join Real Madrid, that when it did eventually materialize and happen, it was like, wow, bro, it was, heartbroken, man. Heartbroken.
I wanted to ask you this, and then we can do the freestyle, which is more like a outro freestyle.
The outro today.
Yeah, the outro. There's like, I can't remember the timeline in the documentary, if it was the same time or before and after, but Gaspart obviously says, I'm the worst president of Barca's history or something like that. And then there's the image of the stadium chanting for his resignation, and him just like has this dejected look. Did you feel bad for him?
For Gaspart?
Yeah.
I permanently feel bad for Gaspart. That's another. I didn't really finish my thought. That he looks goofy. He's very passionate and open. Wears his heart in his sleeve. But I have this permanent feeling of kind of empathy or sympathy rather. That yes, I did feel bad. I guess the documentary leaves you wondering who is telling the truth. And I want to see it again. I wish I'd come prepared for this, because this is kind of our Figo, El Caso Figo pod in the end. I didn't know that
I didn't know either. We didn't know what we were talking about. So I would have liked to have seen it again. I only saw it once, and it was, when it came out, it was a month ago. But the doc kind of leaves you wondering, okay, who is telling the truth, right? And I don't know if to believe all the words that are coming out of Gaspar's mouth. I'm pretty sure that he has reason to sort of defend his stance and maybe twist or tell his truth, or maybe twist the truth a little bit. I don't know. The same can be said with Figo and Florentino Perez, even though both are very adamant in of course stating that they are telling the absolute truth. Who's telling the truth in all this? I don't know. And there is a point. There is some. You can sympathize and feel sorry for even a Luis Figo, like with all the pressure that must have been surrounding him while he was away in Italy with his family on holiday at the time, and paparazzi taking videos and photos from him, and the media spectacle that it was at the time, which again, compared to now, was probably nothing, but at that time must have had some serious consequences on this is the connection with his family, emotions, So I certainly have sympathy for all parties, and that's kind of also why I guess I wrote that article for Barca Blaugranes at the time, to kind of shed a different light. I mean, what is it now? Like 22 years have passed. Mm-hmm. It's something. I don't know if it's funny, like so much time has passed, but I don't know if I would have necessarily changed anything if I had the power to rewind time, even though it's certainly interesting to take this as a what if Figo had stayed, and kind of how would Barca had done during that time, having the two best players in the world continue to play together and continue to build something that they were starting there at the time. And because quite frankly, I mean, it was just a disaster when Figo left. We went on a drought and we had like an identity crisis, and we needed Joan Laporta and Ronaldinho and Rijkaard to save us from the hell that we were in for many seasons at that time, So it's an interesting what if. What would have happened if Figo stayed? What would have happened to, Florentino would have had to pay a lot of fucking memberships, right? So if he had gotten elected, which I'm not sure if he would have gotten elected. Well, he would have, I guess, because we wouldn't have known if Figo were to join until after he got elected. But it's a huge what if. can he still attract the Zidane, the Ronaldos later, you know?
I think so. I mean, I think that, yes, I think Florentino came into becoming president of Real Madrid with he always talks about, Bernabeu being the best president in the history of the club and modeling after him, this whole bringing in of Galacticos and signing the best players of your opponents. And he certainly has done that and has continued to do so over the years. I guess Mbappe is the first one that hasn't really worked out for him. But, I would have imagined him bringing in, the washed up Ronaldo and a balding Zizou. No, I kid. Well, he was fat. He was fat. It was not peak Ronaldo. You can agree with that.
No, it wasn't peak, but he was still damn good. I mean,
yes.
But he probably still would have been able to sign stars and stuff. But it's worth noting that I wonder how much, because when Figo arrived at Real Madrid, he was amazing that first year. And the shift was overnight. Real Madrid all of a sudden became, they were Champions League semi-finalists that year. They won the league title. And then Barca went the other way. How much...
Figo was never Barca Figo, though.
No,
in my opinion.
No, that first year, I think arguably his best season ever, man. That first year at Real Madrid, he was unstoppable. I don't deny that his peak was at Barca, but that first year at Real Madrid, he was unbelievable. But anyways, my point is, how much of that was a lure for Zidane to be like, okay, I'm joining this really exciting team that just won the league. They've won Champions Leagues. They come close to winning the Champions League again. Like, if Figo doesn't join, is it that appealing for him to join Real Madrid? I don't know. That's just a question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you something really quick. What was it? You said something. Damn it.
Big
Should we
Figo.
just listen to some rap?
Okay. But dude, Figo would never lived up to the Barca Figo. You agree, right?
I think that first year he did. I think beyond that, I don't think he was quite the same. But that first year, I think he did.
Did you talk about this with Matt or Dan? David, excuse me.
Not really, no.
Oh, okay.
No. I think undeniably, as a stretch, his best stretch of football was at Barca. But I think that first year at Real Madrid, he was amazing. Let's listen to some rap and then sign off.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Yo, next time.
Yeah.
I'm going to look into this. I'm going to listen to your pod with David.
Okay.
And was it all you guys? Can I get in on this next time? I would love to have asked him some questions.
I can talk to him. Maybe we can have him on Churros.
That would be great.
Okay. All right. Let's listen to one more jingle. This was supposed to be the mid-tro. It's now the outro because we never know what's going to happen on this podcast. But as a reminder, I have not listened to this freestyle. I'm listening the first time with you guys listening. Diego always sends me the beats and the freestyle right before we start recording. So this is new to me. So I'm going to press play. Diego, you want to pull it up there on your end as well?
Yep. I'll pull it up real quick. Give another shout out to my buddy M Fawn, aka Faunosaur. As always, you know where to find his deeds in the description below. And go check his stuff out. Fantastic beat maker, producer, artist, and just makes really nice music, good vibes. And he's so gracious enough to allow me to spit some shit over it. Whatever comes out is what I put pen to paper, and eventually I record it. Quick, nasty, raw, dirty, much like this podcast. So yeah, without any further ado, here's another Faunosaur beat with some Dyslex rhymes sprinkled on top.
All right. Beautiful. 3, 2, 1.
Monday, 26th. Churros, Faunosaur, Dyslex, the spot for the freestyle. I can't stop. I was born to rock a lot. Let's go. Tick tock, hook we must stop. Kitchen gets hot when we look in the lock. Lock in the look. Let it cook. Play gon' play, don't need to feel shook. You're a good book, you nigga, yes you are. Turn your world like a page of I'll use some more. These thoughts, they sting deep like a thorn. But hey, just is the way that I was born. You want my scorn, I did for one like I swore to. My heart is torn, I ignored you. Memories we mourn, I adored you. You want my scorn, I did for one like I swore to. My heart is torn, I ignored you. Memories we mourn, I adored you. But that was then and this is now. We're all adults here. We all make choices. We respect each other for who we are. And in some cases, a goddamn porn star. I'm only being honest and real, you know.
Goes hard, man. Beat goes hard.
Hope you enjoyed that.
Love it. That's a sick beat. Freestyle was
Beats.
great. Love
The
it.
beat's great. So I passed it on to him. He actually said that this was his. I set the bar. He's like, this was my favorite one yet. I was a little surprised. But I'll take it, man. I'll take it. Like I said, I just like having fun with these little raps. I keep them limit it to 1 minute, and then just leave the rest of the instrumental going for you guys to enjoy. As today we close the pod with again the sounds of Faunosaur. Go check his stuff out. Support independent music. Support independent artists. There's so much talent in this world. And yeah, I'm happy to use our humble platform as another outlet and trampoline for these guys like M-Fun, like my buddy, to have his music heard. So go check his stuff out, Kiyan. I'm happy you were bopping your head to this one. And any last words?
Shout out to Faunosaur, shout out to Diego Lorijn, shout out to all of our listeners, and shout out to patreon.com/Churros y Tácticas, where you get the rawest version of this podcast once a week. That happens on Thursdays now. So we'll be back. It's like 3 days. We'll be back over on patreon.com/Churros y Tácticas. So go there. Thanks, Diego. This was fun.
I'm going to order my adapter so I can have the full setup going. Order that now so it'll get there for Thursday.
Done. All right. Thanks, Diego. It was fun.
All right, buddy.
Peace
You
out.
too. Peace.